Okay, sure. I wasn't sure who was going to introduce the panel, um, but
Okay, this is the panel, guys. Go ahead, now you're introduced.
I was trying to get Dan to do it for a second, but that's fine. Um, so this year for the future of Snap, we always like to have a conversation with everyone here, but we thought for the format for starting off, um, we would try we would basically just each of us would say one or two things around sort of three uh, different rounds of ideas. And Jens came up with this. And I think that these are as good a separation of any. Is we'll start off by each saying one or two things that we're looking forward to in the next year or so for the language and the IDE, around the Snap community, and around schools and educators. And we haven't coordinated our thoughts of what we want with each of the others. So there will almost certainly be sort of some duplication. Um, and I think that'll just tell you sort of as a group, what are some of the things we are, sort of most actively interested with that. So why don't I just pick on Jens since he's Jens to start and say, what is, the one or two things that you're thinking about for.
We should start by saying the usual, nothing that we say here is a promise.
Yes.
Okay, now Jens, go ahead.
Also not a threat, which is something that was something of an aha moment to me when you was asking, like, when does it stop? Where does it stop, with features? So for me, kind of, it has been an interesting pattern that we've been sort of alternating between extending the language and working on the UI part. So this time was definitely an extending the language year, where we've added more introspection, kind of, more to the meta programming that we'd already started last year. But last year was more into, how you can reduce the features in the IDE to build micro worlds, to build things that are less intimidating. So for me, I'm excited to again pick up that part and maybe take it a little further, so that I'd love for Snap, as it gets more powerful, as more features, as more blocks are added, to start in a less intimidated way, so that there are fewer blocks by default that are shown, and that maybe the other blocks are, you can expand them, you can find them when you need them, they get, but that there is more of a sense of, yes, I can see all the important parts here, and I can use Snap the way it presents itself on the opening. When I first open it, I can already do, most things with it. But then if there's something special I want, I can maybe expand kind of little groups and the palette. This is something I'd like to do because I'm afraid that teachers probably love micro worlds, but don't want to constantly build these micro worlds for themselves. Like, I mean, it's great if you can hide stuff you don't need, but I'd like to explore the other way. What if you'd have to show the stuff that you want instead of hiding the stuff you don't want? With regards to the language, after we've added so many things, I feel now I'm not ready to think about adding more features, but that'll come, I'm sure. Why don't you just pass it on?
Is it okay if I disagree with that?
To be expected.
Yeah. It really, as an old logo person, it really, really bums me out that the word micro world has come to mean turn things off rather than turn things on. What it used to mean to build a micro world is to add new primitive features that were about something in particular. And I always use the example of Andy DeSessa wanting to teach physics in Logo, to teach mechanics. And so he added a turtle command called kick And what that does is put an impulse of energy into the turtle. And you have to figure out now which ways is the turtle going to move. So if the turtle's moving up the screen and you kick it rightward, does it, turn 90 degrees and start going to the right? No, it starts going to the northeast, right? So that's a learning thing. And it wasn't done by removing or hiding any features. It was done by adding stuff that's specific to some topic. And I said in a discussion we had earlier, but not in a meeting, it's like the way the word timeout in parenting, which used to mean, okay, look, kid, you're sort of hyper excited and having a hard time being in the conversation. Would you like to take some time out? Rather than what it now means, which is, okay, you're being bad, so as your punishment, you're getting a timeout. And it feels like micro world has come to mean a punishment, where you can't have certain things.
I just have to immediately jump in, sorry. This is kind of the usual thing that happens when we discuss things that, we get a lot excited about. So see, to me, this has never been about kids. The micro world is not about students. It's about teachers. What I've learned in the kind of past, months and year is that we might be doing okay thinking about empowering students and giving them, something that they can gain agency over. But if the teacher it multiplies for a teacher by the factor of numbers of children in the room, and if teachers feel uncomfortable, and we've seen it, here in Heidelberg in the room where there are teachers and say, well, these new meta features, they're great, but maybe it just goes too far. Like I'm not secure with those. So I think it's about giving teachers the same sense of agency, of ownership, and of saying this attitude of, I can do this with my class. So this hasn't been something that we designed to punish anybody, but to make teachers feel secure, such that kids will be able to use it. Because if teachers don't feel secure, they're going to do whatever somebody else tells them is the right thing to do.
And if I can comment on a difference between Logo and Snap, is the obvious difference that in Logo you didn't have a palette. So even if the world was huge, you were not presented with all the possible commands all at once in your screen. You had to know which ones to type.
That's true.
So the micro world could be just a piece of paper showing you which commands you are suggested to use. Whereas in Snap, you see all these things when you open it, and they may be overwhelming. So that's I think a big difference.
I guess so. I think another thing to say about that is metaprogramming is a special case. Even in text language land, and even in the Lisp world, which is really where metaprogramming got its start. There are people who hotly argue that there shouldn't be reflection in the language at all, and people shouldn't program in that style. And there are other people who do everything with macros, and they don't have any non-macros in their program. And that is just a big difference between people. And I can see the cognitive load argument about metaprogramming specifically. But I'm nervous about, how do I say this? Ending up with a situation in which you start up Snap and it looks exactly like Scratch.
I don't think this is. I don't think this is what I was suggesting. I mean, there are obviously groups of blocks that are now shown together from which you might use one all the time and the other, part of the time. And there are a bunch of blocks that you might not regularly need, but they're just there in the palette, which is the nature of the palette. And I think a challenge, and it can be a fun challenge, and we're going to have to try this, with users, is to find out which ones we can, maybe place in the second row, where we don't need to have them all the time, but where they're still discoverable and how to do this. I don't have any plan for this, but so yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How about Michael?
Yeah. So I would say my feeling for, I think for the IDE is the same way. It's sort of empowering teachers to have an environment that they feel comfortable in. And I think some of this also goes to not just the blocks itself, but the explainability of what's going on. Is we have some of that with help information, but just really letting people sort of answer their own questions of, I don't understand what this block does or why this happened in Snap, and helping people feel confident about answering those questions. And so I think on the IDE side, that's one of the big things that I've been thinking about. The other thing is one of those language features that I think is kind of small, but I think that I feel like we've been missing is some definition of a map or a table. And there's a lot of argument that we don't really need something like this, because we have association lists and we have 2D views of existing tables. But the thing that I keep thinking about is how we can use things like textual names as an easier interface than just indices of some list, and do things that are really expressive, like when you use a block that has drop-down menus that have the exact items that you might expect, instead of needing to find something. And so I think there's a lot of nice ideas around there that we could do. And then the other piece that I think would be fun with some of these things is we've gone down this meta programming world. And you might notice that in certain places, we return numerical indices instead of text for certain values. And that's because we're trying to make programs that work across translations. And so I think the second piece of this is, can we build data types in Snap that have nice textual presentations, but let you write programs that if you translate them to another language, when you select your motion blocks, for example, or you ask, the user, did you type yes, that those things semantically work across multiple languages. And so I think that there's a lot of, expressiveness that we could sort of add to Snap to make those kinds of projects easy, so that if we give someone a project, especially for sharing curriculum now with BJC between English, Dutch, German, Spanish, can we build projects that actually make sense in 4 different languages? And it's a pretty tricky problem, but I think we can make a lot of progress.
Yeah, I agree with that, absolutely. There's a comment in the chat from Dan about there are lessons to be learned from Scratch. And I just want to be clear that when I said I don't want Snap to look like Scratch, I didn't mean that there's anything bad about Scratch. I just meant that there are some things that that we do, that only we do, that are still essential to what we are. But obviously we have learned everything from Scratch. That's why we look like that. We look like them. Oh, and Michael, you were talking about better presentations of abstract data types. And that reminded me that that's one of Jens's classic examples of what to do with metaprogramming, right? That that we can build an abstract data type feature that makes constructors and selectors automatic. So that's a great example, which I should have used yesterday if I'd remembered.
We need another conference where we show all the things that we already have that we didn't show.
Yeah. I know, there's this discussion going on in the forum about shift click to remove a block from a script. And everybody's saying, who knew that this was in Snap?
Yeah, see, I can retire now. Everybody is going to find out new features for the rest of their lives.
That's right.
They're
Yeah.
already in there. Yeah.
Just pretend you're working.
Right.
Yeah.
So Ryan, do you want to go next?
Oh, well, what's my feature that I want to add? Everybody's going to throw things at me, but the only major programming paradigm that we are not yet presenting in Snap is declarative or logic programming, like what Prolog does. So I think that would be great, which largely means having an associative memory, a memory that you can look things up in by keywords. So content addressable memory, I guess is the way to say it. And also the resolution algorithm. So that's what I want to add.
I'm not throwing anything at you.
Okay, good.
You're too far away.
Yeah.
Bernat, how about you?
So I'm simpler. I think I've said that a couple times. I have two wishes, and I think I've had them other years too. One is the famous hybrid primitives. That's how I learned how to program in Smalltalk, and that's something that I missed when I started working on Snap. And what that means is you can edit a block that hasn't been written using blocks. That's a primitive block, such as the for each block, for example. And you can see a sort of fake implementation with blocks and an indication that this is not the code that's actually running, but it's actually running a primitive. But if you want to overwrite that definition that's portrayed in blocks, you can. And then that version is the one that takes over, right? That's how it worked in Smalltalk, and it let you, I mean, in Smalltalk, you don't have many primitives. Most of the system is written in itself. But when you do have one, you are presented with an alternative code that you can actually use. So you can tell the system, do not use this primitive, I'm writing it myself. And that's really good because it's sort of a live library that you can explore, and you can see how the people who know the most about the system, who are the ones who are building it, would write a complicated function such as for each or map or something like that, or even move X steps. And you can inspect those blocks and see how they would be built. And it's a really good way of having examples live in the system without having to go to open examples. And, you know, the other thing, I know we said one thing, but I think this one I had said already, is people were complaining a lot about debugging in another session, and I just realized that I don't know what people are using to debug text-based programming, but in my experience, it's terrible in every single language except a couple of them, and I doubt that people who are complaining about Snap's debugging are using these languages. I don't think we're so terrible at debugging, but we could do much better.
Yeah.
And one thing we could do better with is something that I get stuck usually, is when I have a project where I'm building a lot of clones, and each one has a slightly different property, such as a variable that changes, or, you know, properties that change. And I want to know what's the value for this particular clone that I can see right now on the screen. And I cannot do that. So the way I do that is I put a when space pressed say whatever property, I press space, and then I can see all the values in the screen, or I use one click save, right? I'd love to be able to right click, inspect this clone, and get a view into the state of that clone. I don't know what that would look like, but I would love to have something like that.
I would definitely second debugging as sort of the other big idea, somewhere between language speakers, ID.
Michael, you're fading out.
Yeah, your audio is a little bit bad, Michael. I don't know what's wrong.
That's weird.
Yeah.
Okay.
That might be my fault. I told him he was coming across kind of loud a couple hours ago.
Right.
Should we move on to second? What did we call that?
Yeah.
Round.
Yeah, we should.
Oh,
Yep.
why don't we give? Okay.
So this is the one about community. Right. Oh.
Yes, community.
So when we started the community site and the forum, we were really, really nervous about allowing side conversations. And we tried to stop kids from doing it. And oh, Michael has literally faded away. I'd like to undo that. I'd like to get to where we aren't nervous about conversations happening that we're not looking at. And what stands in the way is sort of legal liability issues rather than any desire on our part or any technical problem. We could do it. So that's my big thing is and part of that is some of the traditional Scratch things like enabling comments on projects, which we haven't done.
I think that there's another aspect of the community, which I mean, I agree with that. And I think for
Sorry,
Whoa, we're laughing because you're super loud now, Michael.
yes.
You're a little too
Is there
hot.
a middle
Little hot.
ground in your? You've gone
The
up to
automatic level works well for most people.
something
It's
between what was
saturated.
before and what's now.
Yeah, right.
If you saw the waveform, it would be all the way up to the top.
no, see, I'm looking at a waveform, and was
This
Perfect.
is now it's great.
see now.
Perfect. Carry on.
Okay. What was I going to say?
Community.
Yeah, no, what part of, I think the other part of community that I think we have to do a better job building, but I think also from what comes out of SnapCon is the types of tools and building support for all these things really needs to grow because, there's the four of us here that you see as sort of, larger tiles, but that's a part-time job for all four of us. In many ways. And so I think one of the things that I would like to see is how we can grow, especially things like Snap extensions and support for building libraries that handle some of these ideas. Is now that we have this extensions interface, and it's by no means perfect, it's got some limitations that we can, but how do we grow the support for building and trying some of those ideas? Because I don't think everything that we want be always built into the editor at the beginning all the time, but there's a lot of I think neat ideas that we can do to sort of grow the the group of folks who are building and sharing these things, prototyping things with students, that really get us some feedback before we have something perfect that needs to be deployed. And so I think one aspect there is how do we get the community of people building Snap extensions and Snap tools to grow as well.
Mhm. Yes.
I'm very, very excited about the extensions we already have. It seems to be a good thing. I'm really glad we kind of made that last year, because already we have some very exciting ones. And I love all the discussions that have come out of this. I feel like, wow, we should have done this a long time ago. It would have been so much richer, so much better for everybody. Like, I've learned so much from the discussions with Eckhard Modrow from Göttingen, from how he's using his SciSnap extensions for his courses at the university. And there have been some really, really cool discussions with Glenn's team and with their course. So I feel like we're much more working in a community where, there are people working on special aspects within the universe of Snap. So yeah, that is something I definitely like to continue, like how we can make this even, I don't know, I've got some echo, how we can make this even better. But the community is more than just the Snap editor and the blogs that are in there. And it's also more than the site, I think. So yes, I'd like to have more ways for kids to interact. And I'm afraid that some of the issues we won't be able to solve because we're having two different opinions about them. For example, I personally love things like a like button, because I feel I can interact with somebody whose language I don't speak. So if there's some emotion, it's a way for kids across cultures to send tokens of appreciation. Whereas, of course, Brian sees more the part that it might engage kids too much and draw them into, and then it's kind of a marketing instrument. So I'm afraid that in some things we won't agree. But also, I'd like to think about how we can make SnapCon, like something that has happened here, how we can grow that. It's been such a pleasure to be together again with people here in Heidelberg. It all started 3 years ago. And at the same time, it's so great to see that many, many more are online. And there's been this interesting, time zones issue where the conference is longer than it needs to be because we only have these few overlapping hours, but where the extra time also is kind of cool to have, but sometimes awkward, like it's getting really late at night over here. So there is kind of time missing afterwards. And I'm not yet sure what to make out of this, but I feel the community coming together in person, like actually meeting teachers, is so important. I'd like to explore that more. Bernat, what do you think?
Yeah, I will speak just about the community side, which is the part of Snap in which I'm the most involved, the cloud and the community side. And I'd like to apologize for a very bad decision that I made in a rush 4 years ago when we were about to be cut out from the old cloud, and I had to very quickly implement this new cloud. And I believed, it's on me for believing the hype of the internet, which you should never do. And I was reading everywhere that the new trend was to separate things in the web so that you had a backend layer and a front-end layer, and they should communicate via an API. So that's three things that you have to deal with. And that's great if you're at least 3 people and each of you controls one thing. When you're one person, too, sometimes it's a terrible idea because every single tiny change small as it may be, means that you have to change 3 things. And that makes you very lazy, and that makes you take shortcuts, and that makes you do things that you shouldn't do. And that's why the community site has looked pretty much the same for at least 2 years. We have been basically fixing things and adding small tweaks here and there. But last year, I finally said that's enough. When at a SnapCon, someone asked whether we could have links to collections in the carousels. So like you click on the title of the collection and that brings you to the collection page. And I was like, yeah, of course, that's a 1-minute change. And I tried to implement it, and it took me more than 2 hours, and I couldn't do it because of my bad decisions. And I decided that I had to rewrite the whole site. And I've finished rewriting the site. It's not deployed yet. I just need to tweak a bunch of things. I'll need to rethink all the security things that we had thought over the past years, and we'll get exploited again because I will have introduced new bugs and holes. But I'm feeling really happy now about the new design. It's super easy to change things. I did that link thing. It took me 2 seconds, which is what I thought it should have taken before. So I'm really happy about this. And now I'm ready. Once we deploy it, I'm ready to listen to suggestions about the community site and implement things like comments, implement things like, I've wanted to be able to follow people for a long time. Maybe unbeknownst to the followed party, but from time to time you see this user that's publishing amazing projects, and you're like, I don't want to miss the next project that this person publishes, even if they don't know I'm following them. I don't care about the popularity thing, but I want to know when this person makes a new project. I'd like to have a list of followed people and a feed, sort of like a social media feed where you get the latest projects from your favorite users. So we will be ready to tackle these things, I hope, in a bunch of months. I hope we can show you some of this stuff at Snapshot.
Okay, should we move on to the last round?
No, actually,
No.
I want to say, we've all talked about how frustrating it is that our forum is all about abstruse technical details. And we don't have the kinds of discussions that Scratch does on their forum. And I don't want to stop people talking about advanced technical abstruse details, but we have to find a way to make the forum more inviting to beginners and to kids who don't care how it's implemented in JavaScript and so on. So I'm not sure what that entails, but I mean, we started trying to do that with the topic of the month. But
they like it, and they like it.
And
I mean, I mean, the forums has been basically you, Brian, single-handedly taking care of it and engaging with kids. So I just want to, thank you for that so much. It's been so frustrating. I'm reading every post, but I try not to engage too much. I feel the forum community is too small to be self-sustaining. And it's too specialized to be a community of learners. And I think the forums are of great value for the occasional educator who pops in. But it's very much an adolescent, doing their spiel thing. And I really don't know how to turn it more into an active community. Yeah. That'd be interesting, maybe, to get some feedback from others.
So Richard was asking for some stats on the collection. Sorry, on the community and on the cloud. I'm trying to find that. Just 1 second. So we have currently over 500,000 users, 628,000 users, and 5,700,000 projects in total. 40% of which are shared. That doesn't mean public. That means shared. So they are not on the community site, but if you have the URL, you can access them. I don't have the data for the ones that are published, but it's a small fraction of this. So what you see on the community site is only
roughly 200,000.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like a 10% of the total number of projects that there are in the community.
No, it's actually 3.4%.
Oh yeah, you're right. There was a zero. Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so on average, every day it's roughly 3,000 new projects and a little less than 300 signups. Yeah.
Yeah. So should we move on to the final one?
Yeah, let's move on.
And the final one was
schools and teachers.
Well, so
first.
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say not me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I could just tell you that, you know, we didn't solve the problem yet about what to do with schools. We're having some legal issues, and it's sort of not really a legal issue, but it's sort of something where we're kind of, in a way, still puzzled. At least I'm still puzzled that we're having these issues, because to me, as an ordinary citizen and a lawyer, it seems like something almost strange. So we're required by some laws, and it's not just in the US, it's also in Europe, to, you know, guarantee that, you know, we're not breaching any privacy things. But in order to make sure that we aren't, we basically need to keep track of private data and of personal data. So the state right now is that we basically do everything that we thought was right, and that we don't save anything that can, like, we don't ask for anything. We don't require that users share any information with us that allows even us to identify them. Like, if, you know, to tell you all a secret here out in the open, somebody comes to us and tells us, you know, this is my account, we really have no way to be sure that it is, because we're not keeping track of any secret data, of any birth dates, of anything. And I thought we were kind of on the safe side with this, but turns out we're not. And I'm really, really afraid that in order to comply with laws, we need to gather data that can be breached at some time, and then we're really in deep trouble. So this is something where I feel this is a little bit ridiculous. Like, they send us these papers that they want us to sign, and they're meant for huge corporations that, you know, make money out of this. And so they're actually there kind of to guard companies like Google, kind of to keep them from doing bad things, but actually who's suffering from them and who can't comply with them are the open source community projects like ours that aren't really backed by their, you know, corporations that are behind them. So this is something that worries me a lot. Basically, we tell schools, don't use our cloud if you need to send us a contract, just do everything offline. Even that seems to be an issue. And it also is an issue for us because, you know, everybody, as you just now, is interested in numbers. You know, how big is the community? If we tell the community to just do it all in secret, we lose touch, and we have difficulties, you know, justifying what we do to the people who pay our salaries. So, okay, this isn't what I want to do, but this is what it's not what I'm excited about, is what I'm really worried about, because we made Snap so it is used in schools, and we thought by making it all free and open source, we were doing the right thing. And I kind of feel, is there a term in German? It's called upsides, in football and soccer, like when you're forged ahead and you find yourself like, oh wow, now I'm at this position where I shouldn't be. Somebody say something positive.
Right.
So I'll say one thing, which again goes in the vein of really not promising anything. Is, now that, like, Bernat and I have been talking back and forth for a couple of years about some of the things to get towards student and teacher accounts that we want, and the things that we need to do to support schools to be able to use these student and teacher accounts is, now that we've basically re-architected a large part of the community site, we're ready to start working on some of these things. And so I think the main thing to say is that we know that there's a lot of ways that this could be made easier. And we have a bunch of ideas for, how we can do it. But we definitely want to start small with things that we can support, because we're also not really super interested in rebuilding every single grading and submission management system that exists out there. But it very quickly can turn into that, even
Well,
without realizing.
we could interface with.
No, we'll have that conversation later. But I think that's a place where, now that we've made some of these backend improvements, we're in a better position to start working on them. But it's also a place where we can definitely potentially use some programming help, especially on the interfacing side, and building some of those tools that that we can support. But it is something that we're super aware and we do want to work on, and now we're finally in a place where I think we can make progress.
Great.
That was positive enough for me.
Yeah.
I'll say something positive really short. I'm really happy to see teachers from my local small part of the world attending the conference. Really happy. And I wish we could meet more in person. We haven't met in person for a long time. And I wish we would do that. We sort of tried to create a local Snap community during the almost end of COVID. That didn't work out. We had one meeting and then we didn't have any more. But yeah, let's try harder.
Brian, what do you think?
Well, it seems like the sort of legal issues with respect to schools are a big distraction from what kids and teachers really care about. And I think we should try harder to give people what they want, except for the like button, which we shouldn't do. People even know they want it. But one thing we've talked about, one of the problems with signing contracts, I mean, this is getting down into the nuts and bolts of legal issues. But one of the problems with signing contracts is that to the extent that Snap has an owner, it's the University of California. The University of California is this huge, monstrous, elephantine organization that doesn't easily sign contracts, and it has to be like that for them. And so that's sort of slowed us down in dealing with this whole contract question. And we have raised the idea amongst ourselves of doing what Scratch has done, which is starting a separate organization, the SNAP Foundation or whatever, to be the legal owner of SNAP. And it could sign contracts. Yeah. So that's kind of terrifying. I mean, I don't know much about starting a nonprofit organization, but it also sounds exciting as a thing to think about. So it's P.S. A reason not to do it. This is something Jens says a lot, is that there's a lot of prestige associated with the University of California. So we don't want to lose that. We don't want to make it that it isn't part of the University of California. Anyway.
So we have 10 minutes left. Maybe we should open it up.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. We'll take a few questions and then we want to leave a few minutes at the end to thank folks.
I've been wondering, now that you could write something like find all the colors, and you could obviously from that even write something that searches and replaces conditionally, whether the IDE could make it easier to do those things, since it's already possible to write it with the metaprogramming.
I'll just chime in. I think it's interesting, Ken, to think about not really how the IDE would duplicate some of the things you can do, but how we could make it such that you can add features that you metaprogram to the IDE, so that we make certain parts of the IDE, you can append something to that menu, or you can make a new button with something that
Absolutely.
Or you can load
I see. Yeah. But there are, I'm just going to say but, because I see Brian vigorously nodding his head.
Yeah.
I again want to bring to your attention that we're dealing with schools and teachers. And this is something that I'm a little frustrated, frankly, that some of the old logo people seem to have forgotten that, that it's can be very hard for teachers if you have a room full of different snaps of different environments. Something is not working, to deal with that. For the purposes of working in a class, I don't know anything about pedagogy, and it makes me, frankly, a little worried that, we're all so excited about technology, but uniformity is something that is worthwhile to think about in a pedagogical concept if you're in a classroom. And I'd really like, much as we love Smalltalk has been terrifying because every kid that is working on Smalltalk forks their own Smalltalk. It is impossible to support kids doing that. So even though it's my favorite ever programming language, I fully understand why it is impossible to use Smalltalk in schools today. And this is just something that, why do I have to give? I'm not even, I can get all excited about, yeah, let's just give you all the features you want, but I actually want teachers to be happy too.
But that said, finding users of blogs and of variables, that's a pretty harmless thing to add to a right-click button menu, I'd say.
Yeah, I think that there's, I think there's one thing that I'd say on this idea though, which is like, now that we have some of the metaprogramming tools, now that we have extensions, this also makes it perfectly, I shouldn't say perfectly, but it makes it much more possible for us to experiment and prototype. And one of the things that I think has been really hard about Snap over the past decade is, we prototype ourselves with features, but we don't have a great way to release something that is a prototype that doesn't have an expectation of becoming a core feature or a particular part of the language, right? That if we put something in Snap and it's on snap.berkeley.edu, we implicitly create that expectation. And so I think extensions and libraries are now a place where we can sort of break some of that down, and modifying the environment to show callers, or to even just have a block that helps you find other blocks or something like that, I think are great things to experiment with.
Yeah, you could have the code inspection extension that adds these things to the advanced debugging extension. I don't know.
Yeah.
I actually have a bunch of those I might want to share with you.
Got about 5 minutes left. Michael, do you want to take us home with a slide deck to thank everybody for attending?
Yeah, all right. Well, while I'm pulling that up, is there anyone who has a last minute quick question that they want to share, or I need to find it?
Mark, there's a library that's called.
Do you want to repeat Mark's question for the?
Oh, sorry. Where can we find a version of the switch or case control structure?
Mm.
The answer is it's in a library. In the first group of libraries at the top, there's a multiple conditional thing. Yeah.
All right. And now, let me see if I can share these slides. Cool. Can people see?
Yes.
Yes.
Although these. Wait a second. I shared.
Now we can't see it anymore.
Yeah, no, one sec, because those are the 2021 slides. Those are not going to be useful.
I mean, the feature is pretty similar.
Oh, well, okay, here we go. All right.
Put it in the chat for you, Michael, if you need it.
Oh, wait.
Zoom took over.
There's a comment. There's a comment in the chat from Dan Stormont about the way we approach education in classrooms. And yes, when I was a high school teacher, I somehow lucked out and got permission to not give grades in my classes. And that was just such a different world. You saw amazing creativity from kids. And also, more honesty in the relationship between teacher and student, because, they didn't have to try to suck up. So yeah, it's very frustrating to me how schools do things. So yeah, agreed. Okay, sorry, now you can run the slide back.
All right, cool. So yeah, this has been SnapCon 2022. So for those who haven't been around the whole time, 3 years ago we were just in Heidelberg. 2 years ago we were planning to sort of just be in Berkeley, and then the pandemic happened. And I think in retrospect it was a super great thing that we all got to be online together. And this year is the first time that we now had a pod in Berkeley and a pod in Heidelberg. And that was somewhat of an experiment. And I think it worked pretty well. Most of us seem to be jealous of the folks that are in Heidelberg in particular. So what I just want to call it was, challenges there. But in the future, next year, we're definitely going to do SnapCon. Where it should be in person, how we have pods again are all something that, we would very much like to hear from all of you again, how how that worked. But closing out, especially, wanted to say thanks to everyone who helped make SnapCon possible. These are sort of our loose group of folks as an organizing committee, but the other group that is super necessary is for everyone to submit and present things. So thank you to everyone who submitted them. And as well, we have a group of volunteers at Berkeley who help manage Zoom sessions, who help host things. So thank you to all of our volunteers. And thanks to everyone who, in addition to buying a ticket to SnapCon, threw in some extra sponsor tickets or cash along the way. Among the other things that are a challenge with a project like this is keeping stuff up and running, and it's been quite a journey of ups and downs the past 6 or 7 years, and in particular the past few years of really running our own infrastructure. So all of those things go a long way. So that was SnapCon. We had a lot of fun, hopefully, and we'll just close it out with a couple tasks for everyone to think about. So Bernat called this out earlier, but we can sort of reiterate it again. If you've shared anything the past few days, built something cool, even if you just think you built something on the side but didn't get a chance to present it, add it to the SnapCon 2022 collection on the Snap Cloud. Beneath each project, when you're viewing it, you can click Add to Collection, and SnapCon 2022 is there. And also, when you're on snapcon.org, you can edit your submission still. So if you presented slides, added a project, keep editing the descriptions, put links there, put resources there. Unlike a regular conference, we let you edit things basically till the end of time. And so that's a great resource. That is also where after the conference, sometime in the future, we will share videos. And the next sort of round of events, Snapshot 2022. We haven't picked the final day yet, but we're going to continue with the first or second Saturday in December. It's probably going to be the exact same time of the day, 8 to 2-ish California time, 5 to 11-ish European time or Central European time. So keep that in mind. We'll do the same type of thing. Lightning talks, share a project round, maybe 1 or 2 shorter talks. So if you've got something, doesn't need to be super advanced. 3 to 5 minutes is plenty to share with everyone. And finally, the other thing is, it is the same group that is developing Snap that is also organizing SnapCon. And all of us have other things to do, so we could really use help in keeping these things running, in either organizing, finding speakers, just managing programs and so on. So if you think that you would like to contribute in some way, please just email us, conference@snap.berkeley.edu, contact@snap, whatever email address you have for us. All of those things are good ways to get in touch. We have multiple email addresses, but they turn out to pretty much just go to the same group of all of us. So with that, thanks everyone. That was all that I had at the end of this. And we will hopefully see you again in, just a few months.
Thanks, everybody. That was awesome.
Thank you. Thank you for the thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.